Good morning, 511. I am here to introduce you to the last part of your last course before you graduate. Very proud of y'all. And this is a very difficult concept that we are going to talk about. So in the beginning of 511, we're talking about security versus access and how E-rate is coming along to advance telecommunications in schools. And a lot of you have come to the conclusion that I wanted you to, which is that most schools are headed toward bring your own device or one-to-one implementation. So for the last 3 modules, or maybe 4 modules of this course, we are going to be looking at bring your own devices and how this may work. Now, the first thing I want to preface this with is bring your own device is not something that you would be doing even as a technology facilitator or a technology leader. And this is something that you may lead the initiative as that, but you would have IT specialists assisting you on this. But in order us to be better versed with how to do this, we are going to learn a little bit about it. So the first thing I want you to do is read these 2 articles. The first one is called 5 Components to Consider for Bring Your Own Devices, and it talks about Willard's Pyramid. And what that is the components that you need to go through and in a particular order to make a BYOD initiative stick. So we're going to talk about each one of these and how they each need to come in a distinct order. And what this, where did it go? And what this article does is it goes on that pyramid and it elaborates on each one of them. So I want you to look at this, and your assignment for the first part of this module will come from here. It will come from sections 3.2.2 and 3.3.1. And what it's talking about is we have to plan for a BYO program before we can do anything with it. We've been talking about security, but what we're going to go on to is the next section. So what that's going to entail is talking about stakeholders and what stakeholders need to be involved: superintendents, principals, supervisors, parents, technology departments, community members, all of this. So after reading this, you're going to talk about in your particular field, if you wanted to implement a BYOD program, what specific stakeholders would you need? Do you have a parent association? Do you have a person that's the leader of that you could get to help? Do you have, for example, in the charter school, do you have community leadership that you need to involve in the stakeholder sharing? Okay, so after that, after stakeholders, we're going to talk about policies. Now, you guys have already updated your acceptable use policy for another class, but what we're going to talk about here is the student handbooks and what we would have to change if we were going to implement a BYOD program. So some of the things that I want you to talk about and think about is right here: who will pay if the technology that the students bring themselves, if it gets broken or lost or stolen at school, what would happen then? Who will repair the device if something happens to it? If the student does not adhere to the acceptable use policy, does the school have a right to take that device away, even though that device is the property of the student and or the parents? Next, it talks about they recommend that most schools start with a pilot program. So that's where we're going to start. Thinking about your whole school and a BYOD program is extremely overwhelming. So for the purposes of this class, we are going to talk about your particular classroom. If you are a kindergarten teacher and you wanted your students to be able to bring their own device into your classroom, what would this look like? So for this assignment and the next couple of modules, that's the realm of how we're going to be thinking. So if you wanted to implement this in your 5th grade classroom, who would be the stakeholders that you would need to involve? What types of policies would you recommend to your principal? Of course, you would not be able to dictate these policies, but you can come up with a recommendation to give your principal. So that's the perspective for this week. We are going to assume that we want to implement a BYOD program in our little 30, 20 man classroom, and we are going to start planning for that. So you are going to look at the stakeholders and the policies for this module, and you are going to draft a document that says who these stakeholders would be and what your policy recommendations would be to the committee. So in order to do this, I have three documents for you to look at. The first we just looked at, 5 components to consider for BYOD. It's a very good read. I had to read it 2 or 3 times to get the most out of it. This second one is called the 10 Commandments for a BYOD program. This is really geared toward professional situations other than schools. We're talking about businesses and their BYOD policies, but it does help me to understand it. Now the third one, again, please read them in this order. I put them in this order for a reason. The third one branches out into our next module. So what this starts talking about is how do we get ready for a BYOD program in our school or our classroom when it relates to networking. So next module, I'll just go ahead and explain this now so that y'all don't have to watch 2 videos. The next module, we're going to talk about bandwidth and access points. So we all know that for PARCC testing with Common Core, we are going to be testing students online. Well, the main problem with that is our schools don't have the wireless network infrastructure in order to make that possible. So for the second module, I'm going to have these 2 resources as well as a few more I'm still looking at. And I'm going to want you to continue your plan for your classroom and think about how many access points and how much bandwidth would it take for your classroom to run a BYOD program. Beyond that, because many of us have set up wireless networks in our houses before, and setting it up for one classroom wouldn't be that much different, although with 30 devices, it's a little more complicated than with 5 or 6. But thinking about after you have your head around access points and bandwidth for your classroom, we're going to start thinking about how large is our school. Can we estimate how many devices would run on a BYOD program for our entire school, and perhaps how many access points and how much bandwidth would be needed to make that possible. Now, in the beginning of this video, I said that you would not be doing this alone if you were rolling out a BYOD program. You would have IT professionals. For example, Secure Edge Networks. I'm going to have this link up here as well on Moodle. This is a professional IT company that does these type of networking things for schools. One of the articles talks about you need to outsource networking and access points, and I completely agree with this. I have a lot of experience in this, and I still would not feel comfortable answering a question to a principal that says exactly how much bandwidth and exactly how many access points do I need, and I would not be comfortable setting up that type of program. They have IT professionals for that, but you as the technology integration professional would guide that person. So I'm going to put up a couple of resources up here to where you can at least try to get your head around how many access points would be used if your whole school was to go to a BYOD initiative. Okay, so after those first 2 modules, our last modules are going to be case studies of BYOD programs that worked. Now, you may think I'm a little nuts for doing all this because we, again, are not IT professionals, we're tech integration professionals. But BYOD is the wave of the future. And when I went to ISTE this past summer and I went to a lot of the BYOD sessions, I found myself completely ignorant on things like bandwidth and access points. So I feel like, oh, in addition, one of the EDTL graduates that's now a tech integration specialist in Texas has to do these types of things. And she called me and she said, "Oh, Dr. V, I never learned about bandwidth and access." So that's why I'm putting this into this class, because this is really the wave of the future. And try to get yourselves a little familiar with this and knowing when you need help from IT people and what you can do yourself. So hope this helps, and let me know if you have any questions or problems. Have a great day.